Welcome to Fight Week on 5, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm your host, Jonathan, aka 3-Piece Combo, and today I'm joined by the fight genius, Mr. Alf Artiaga, as we cover Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders. My friend Alf, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Big time boxing is back, huh?
Yeah, man, this is one of the bigger matches of the year. I believe probably the biggest match to this day. Would you say so too?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
Although Chocolatito for the hardcore, Juan Estrada Chocolatito was a fight that everybody was waiting for almost 6 years, and it lived up to it. So that was the fight of the year, I would say, so far. This one is probably the highest stakes fight so far of this year.
Yeah, biggest fight of the year, and obviously you have the biggest name in the sport, and Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's taking on Billy Joe Saunders, a guy who's coming in. He's kind of game, ready to get into this fight, and unification bout, right? It's going to be a fun one to watch, see these guys come together. So let's get started into this fight, because coming into this fight, it's there was a little bit of controversy, right? There was some issues coming in from the Billy Joe Saunders side about the ring size, amongst some other things. The fight was almost called off, right? The fight was almost called off. What were your thoughts on that controversy and what was going on there?
Well, that used to be something that used to happen all the time in boxing. When they used to say, "Look, we got to sit down and negotiate a fight," it wasn't about really, and I'm talking about the '90s, the '80s, the '90s. It wasn't really about the money, because sometimes the money was already there because the venue was already going to be sold out, so you knew what you were getting on the live gate. So then it was pay-per-view numbers, and then usually you could split those, 60-40, whoever. Yeah, and there's metrics for that. Like Canelo Alvarez, I'm pretty certain is going to get maybe 70% of the pay-per-view money on this, because Canelo could fight. He could fight a paper bag on pay-per-view, and there'll be 500,000 buys. He's one of those guys. So I'm pretty sure he's going to get a big share. But it used to be in the 80s and 90s that when they said, "Look, we're trying to make a fight," they would negotiate the size of the gloves. They would negotiate the size of the ring. And then they would give you updates. They would say, "Look, we've already agreed to a 20-foot ring. We've already agreed to an 18-foot ring. We agreed to 10-ounce gloves." You know what I mean? "We agreed to this referee." They used to negotiate all of those things. They would say, "Look, is Richard Steele acceptable?" And then one camp would say, "No, that referee is not acceptable." "All right, is this referee?" And they would argue and negotiate over the referee. The problem here was that they agreed to all of these things. They agreed to an 18-foot ring. That was already in the contract. Billy Joe Saunders arrives in Dallas and starts talking about, "I want my 20-foot ring." It was a bunch of nonsense. I feel like if I have to apologize for the sport, so I'll go ahead and do it. I'm sorry on behalf of boxing. We do these stupid things from time to time, and this was unfortunately one of those stupid things.
I mean, it was even in one of these interviews that I watched with Canelo, he said that he doesn't even think that Billy Joe's fought in a ring that was 20 feet wide so far. So yeah. Why is he asking for that now? And he said, "Hell, I'll give him the whole AT&T Stadium to run, and I'll still go ahead and beat him." So Canelo was throwing those jabs out there, and he was landing them early. So he was going out there. But for a guy that's coming in and kind of causing some controversy in Billy Joe Saunders, he's kind of stirring up some things, threatening to cancel the fight, all of these things. He says that he's the most game fighter that's come out recently to beat Canelo, and that a lot of the other fighters that come out to fight him are really just looking for that paycheck, looking to get their name a little bit in the spotlight, and then just head out from there. Do you think Billy Joe Saunders is a legit threat to beat Canelo, or do you think that's just all talk?
He's 30-0, and he's 30-0 for a reason, and he has some heads on his wall. But that he's saying that nobody's come out to fight Canelo in a while, that's just not true. Callum Smith, a couple fights back, he was game. He just got beat up against Canelo. Kovalev was winning the fight handily until he got knocked out in the 11th round.
Yep.
Okay? Because I scored that fight, and I scored it with my friends, and then I rewatched the fight, and I'm like, yeah, he was losing. And now not only was he was losing big.
Yeah,
Kovalev was up maybe something like 8 rounds to 2 at that point until he got
those hooks came in.
Yeah, he hit him with that right hand, then he hit him with the left hook, and then it was a wrap. It was over with. And now I've never been more impressed with Canelo in my life, because he was just getting schooled by Kovalev. Had a great game plan. He was bigger. You thought he was going to brawl Canelo, and he actually came out to box him and was winning the fight but Canelo showed who he is. He went all the way up to 175 pounds and brought his power with him. So I don't know. I disagree with Billy Joe Saunders. Canelo Alvarez has been in some big fights. And let's not forget, right before he fought Kovalev, he did get into the ring with Triple G twice. And both fights are classics. So I don't know what Billy Joe Saunders was talking about. I don't know. He got to Dallas and he just went crazy. Hopefully he brings a good fight on Saturday night, because I'm interested to watching it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that CTE is kicking in early or something, but he's making some questionable choices and some questionable things he's saying as well. And to say that these fighters are not game, you speak about the Kovalev fight. I actually watched that fight today again just to kind of see how that fight went, because you can get a game plan from a guy like that who actually put Canelo down in some rounds, and he was working that jab. He was using his length. Like you said, he wasn't there to brawl him or out-muscle him. He was being very technical and just sticking to his game plan, and that's kind of what kept him in that fight and kept him leading the fight. And he was throwing volume. He was knowing to score in the fight. He wasn't looking to knock out, because he knew that if he was going to throw to knock out, he was going to gas himself out. So he was staying disciplined, doing a lot of good things in that fight. And to say that he wasn't game in that fight is kind of questionable. You understand maybe the last fight Canelo had, his opponent was kind of a wash because he signed two opponents back to back, kind of like the Hamza Chimaev thing with the Gerald Mishart and the Damian Maia. Yeah. Like you don't do that too often unless you're like 100% sure you're going to wash this guy and not even take any damage, right? So funny little thing getting into that. But this fight is going to be the first fight with a fully packed crowd. 70,000 loud is going to be in that arena. Do you think that's going to affect the fight?
Well, I think it'll affect it in one sense. The fans watching it are going to be into it. Now the fighter's going to have to, they're going to have to put in the performance, right? So it's going to be a spectacle. It's the first time in a long time. Although, Usman, Masvidal, that was a lot of fun watching that arena. But this is a stadium, and like Canelo said, he's a stadium fighter. He's no longer an arena fighter. He's a stadium fighter.
Right.
It's gonna be fun to see 70,000 people, mostly Mexican. Come on, it's Dallas. Canelo brings his people wherever he goes. So you're gonna have a raucous crowd, a raucous home crowd for Canelo. So it's going to get some juices flowing, and hopefully it starts to get into the heads of guys like Jermell Charlo and, and maybe Calaplant, maybe David Benavidez, and they start thinking about, maybe I want to get in against Canelo and make a super fight. So, yeah, it can only be good things, but you got to have a good fight. You got to have a good-looking fight. It has to be a fight that draws interest on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think it will be, because Billy Joe's really coming in to win this fight. If he sticks to the game plan that he has to stay undefeated, he has a path to victory to win this fight. But Canelo, like you said, man, having that home crowd behind him every single time, if a person actually does come up and beat him in front of his home crowd, that's just going to blossom another star, right? That's going to create a new star in this sport, because then they're going to be known as the person that put Canelo down, who hasn't been put down really often at all. So it's going to be interesting to see, like you said, if this is going to branch out to bring a new fighter into that star arena. So getting into some of the heat of this matchup, right? This is kind of one of the more animosity fights that Canelo has been in, right? Where his opponent has a little more disrespect for him, obviously boxer respect, but has been throwing around words, etc. Do you think this is going to get into Canelo's head, and do you think he's going to fight a little more emotional? Because he said that he does want to hurt him, right? He says he actively wants to go out there. He wants to get punches in his face, and that it motivates him in the training camp. Do you think that's going to cause him to make mistakes?
I don't think so. I think he's too schooled for that, but it is the truth. It's the first time somebody's actually gotten into Canelo's face and actually done some talking. You got to remember, when Floyd Mayweather beat Canelo Alvarez was 21 years old, okay? He had only fought outside of Mexico once, all right? So Floyd Mayweather basically handpicked a guy that was ready for the plucking. He was perfect for what he wanted to do with him. He completely outboxed him. He embarrassed him. Canelo, since then, you could see him almost adopting some of what he learned that night. And not only is he hard to hit, but he brings power behind his counter punches. So I think it's the first time that a guy has really gotten into his face and probably upset him. I think it's just going to refocus him even that much more.
Yeah, because you have a guy that's kind of been on cruise control for a little bit, right? He knows that he's probably, if not the greatest out there, one of the greatest during right now. And he knows that no matter who he fights, he can kind of cruise to a win. He has that experience in his belt, so he can be malleable in these fights and grow throughout the fight, develop the game plan throughout the fight, and understand how to win each of them. So to have a guy actually remotivate Canelo, it's going to be interesting to see if he brings out a little more volume, if he's really, tightened things up, or even a little bit more, because there's always a little bit more in that next level that a fighter can go to. So it's going to be interesting to see if Canelo can even take that next step from the greatest right now to historic levels. It's going to be fun to see if he does that. So let's get into this fight a little bit because, like you said, Canelo's been working in this training camp. He's fighting a guy that he doesn't like. What do you think Canelo's path to victory has to be in this fight?
Well, he has to stay composed, and he has to remember the lessons of the past. A lot of people, I think, unfairly this week are saying that Billy Joe Saunders really doesn't have a chance because his path to victory is very, very narrow. He has to win a decision, and nobody beats Canelo with the judges because judges are human. They just are, and that's why one thing I've always advocated for judges to be put in a separate room and watch the fights on monitors with the sound off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because usually what happens is that these guys get in that arena and think about it. They're going to be in an arena that has 70,000 people. Billy Joe Saunders is going to have some public there because the Brits do travel. But let's face it, it's going to be 50,000 Mexicans, 50,000 Canelo fans. They're going to be loud. They're going to be boisterous. If you say that doesn't affect you at all, then you're just lying. If you're judging a fight and a round could go either way, but that crowd is way behind Canelo, you can see yourself moving that pencil toward, okay, I'm going to give this round to Canelo. It's just the way it is, So, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, so and I think for Canelo, what he has to do is focus on counter punching, right? Because Billy Joe likes to use that jab. He likes to stay using that jab active and build throughout the fight. So if Canelo can kind of do the opposite and learn what his counter punches is throughout the fight, that's going to help him, get that knockout, land those hooks if he wants to. He's going to have to be diverse in this fight, make sure that he goes to the body and to the head. He does that really well already. I think make sure that Billy Joe Saunders is actually on his back foot because he's really good when he's coming forward, but when he's backing up, he's not quite as good. When he gets backed up against the ropes, he'll start throwing a little more wild. He'll throw those wild hooks.
Footwork. Billy Joe Saunders' foot is really known for his footwork. But the thing is that Canelo is really known for how he moves in the ring, how he cuts off a ring. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how Billy Joe Saunders is going to fight Canelo, if he's going to try to fight him in the middle of the ring, which could be to his advantage because he has good head movement. He has good feet. So that could be to an advantage of his. He doesn't want to really crowd Canelo. Not to say that he wants to fight him at a distance either, but he wants to get in, out. He wants to move. He wants to make this fight as mobile as possible. Canelo, when he fought Floyd Mayweather, after the fight, one of the things that he said was, I thought I could hit him. And it's hard to see how a boxer could get into a fight and then, you lose. And then they ask you, all right, what happened? And the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, I thought I could hit him. But it's the truth. Canelo couldn't find Floyd Mayweather. So he ended up hitting his shoulder. He ended up hitting his bicep. He ended up hitting in the elbow because he couldn't touch him. The movement was vast. It was diverse. It was different. Billy Joe Saunders is going to have to do very much the same, but he can't run because it'll just fall into the perception of what people expect in the fight, and he'll just lose 12 rounds to nothing. And that's how it's going to happen. So he's going to have to fight in the middle of the ring. Canelo is just going to have to stick to what he does best. He's going to have to counter off of those punches, slip punches, and then bring the heat right behind it because that's what he's known for. He brings hard right hands on counters. That's what he does. And he goes to the body like every Mexican has always done, that left hook to the body. That's going to be key because you're going to want to slow down Billy Joe Saunders, especially if he's going to fight him the way I think he will fight him.
Yeah, because as far as Billy Joe goes, right, he's good at staying at the range where he can enter and exit where he wants to, right? He's able to kind of get in and out of range how he wants to. Let's get into Noel Leon's comment. Canelo is clearly pound for pound Canelo is clearly pound for pound great fighter. If you don't agree, IQ of combat sports is pathetic. Yeah, 100% agree. The greatest pound for pound right now, 100%. But getting into Billy Joe Saunders, his path to victory, he's going to have to stay with the volume up, right? Like you said, he's going to have to make sure that he's going to win a decision because it's going to be hard for him to knock Canelo out. It's going to be very hard for him to land that knockout punch. But I think staying behind that jab, working behind it that he likes to throw, I think that he's going to be able to at least keep Canelo thinking, right? But he doesn't want to throw everything into each one of these jabs because that's when Canelo will counter. He'll kind of do with what we're talking about with Kovalev, right? He was able to keep that jab just touching him, just to keep him there where he wants to be. And he's going to also have to make sure that he avoids staying in that corner of the ring. Like you said, he has good footwork. So for Billy Joe Saunders, staying out of the corner of the ring is going to be key for him. A lot of the times when he'll get there, he does a good job circling, right? And then getting it, a good position from there. But getting into the corner for him is dangerous because that's when he gets the most wild. He'll throw the looping shots, and Canelo is really, really known for those sharp, crisp hooks that he'll bring inside. So let's go, left hook to the body, right hook to the head, and that could be it. If he gets wild, that could be it. Billy Joe's going to have to maintain his game plan throughout the entire fight because if not, and if he starts getting into, the fight that Canelo wants him to do, it's going to be hard for him because he'll just going to keep getting counterpunched over and over and over again, and he's not going to be able to land anything. So let's get into the predictions. And back to Noah Leon's comment. He said Canelo will fight with his hands up because Billy's skill set. I think so too. What do you think about that, Al?
Yeah, he doesn't want Billy Joe Saunders to score too much either, because he is cognizant of what can happen in a fight because he knows that he did have a home ring advantage against Kovalev, but they showed those scorecards. Even though they had a finger on the scale for Canelo Alvarez, those scorecards showed that Kovalev was going to win that fight if it went to the scorecards. So, he knows that he just can't just show up and they're going to give him a decision. He knows that if he's going to look bad by taking a lot of punishment, and it won't be a lot of punishment because Canelo tends to not really respect you until you make him respect you. And that's the way he's been fighting for like the last 5 years. The last guy to really gain his respect was Triple G. And it is Triple G. It's Gennady Golovkin. He's a Hall of Famer. And Gennady Golovkin cracks you with a right hand. You better show respect. That's the only guy in the last, maybe in his career, that Canelo Alvarez has ever backed down from in an exchange. So, yeah, he doesn't want to take too many punches because he can be made to look bad because that's what Billy Joe Saunders does. That's what he does. That's how he built his record. That's how he built his reputation.
Yeah, man, you said it perfectly. So let's get into these predictions because I think this is going to be one of the tougher fights for Canelo. I think this is a pretty stiff challenge for him up ahead. But I think this is going to be a good one. What do you think about this one? How do you think this one's going to go? Because Tyson Fury said that he's about 90% sure that Billy Joe Saunders is going to knock Canelo out in the 11th round. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know if he hits him with a baseball bat in the 11th round. I don't think Billy Joe Saunders is going to sell out enough to be able to knock out anybody in this fight. He's going to have to try to win this fight by volume, just make it overwhelming, and just win on the scorecards. Now, that's hard to do. I don't think he can stop Canelo because to stop Canelo, he's going to have to risk himself, and he risks himself against Canelo, and Canelo will knock him out, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So his path to victory is very, very, very slim. He has to stay in the middle of the ring. He can't be chased. If he's chased, he's just going to lose the decision because Canelo by the 8th or 9th or 10th round, he's going to decide this is going to be easy for me. And not only is it going to be easy for me, but maybe I could even go for a knockout here because Billy Joe Saunders has just been running for me the whole fight and taking all these punches on the side, on the liver, on the biceps. So his arms are essentially dead. He has no power. So I could probably go for a knockout. So he's going to have to fight him in the middle of the ring. He's going to have to use his slickness, his footwork, and just outland him. And just attempt to do what he's done to many, what he did to Martin Murray, what he did to, especially a great fight, and I have it here in front of me. Not when he fought Chris Eubank, but where is he? Yeah, when he fought David Lemieux. David Lemieux was absolutely feared. And everybody felt that when David Lemieux got Billy Joe Saunders, he was going to end him inside of 3 or 4 rounds. And that's not what happened. He actually blanked them on the scorecards for 12 rounds. He showed them how skilled he can be. That's what Billy Joe Saunders is going to have to do. He's going to have to fight the same fight he fought against David Lemieux. in the middle of the ring, be slick with footwork, volume punches. And I'm talking about a lot of punches. 1,000 punches for 12 rounds, at least.
I'm There we go. I muted myself. There we go. Noel Leon said Billy has to use that jab to perfection and not let Canelo counter him too much. Yeah, that's what I was saying, man. Just, use that jab, but not put everything into it, so he's not leaving himself open to that counter. Just use it kind of as a distance checker, as something to score points. But as far as the prediction goes, I think this is going to be a fight that we see start off kind of slow and build up as it gets later on, because these are both two fighters that like to work throughout the course of the fight. Billy Joe, he'll start off with that jab, and then he'll kind of work that hook in, and then he'll has that really nice right hook. And when he gets that right hook going, he does a good job with it, because he'll keep the jab, making the boxer, put his gloves in front of his face so he can wrap around and get that right hook. So he does a really good job with that. I think that's going to be, his path to victory. But I see this one going where he works the jab, and once he starts to overcommit and try to hit Canelo, that's when that counter-punching ability is going to come in. That's when he's going to start losing the rounds. I think he might be able to win the first couple rounds, but I think Canelo will start starching him in those middle rounds. Like you said, go to the body, drain the power from him, drain the energy from him to where he no longer can run. He's going to get backed up into the ropes again, and then he's just going to land one of those hooks to either the body or the head, and he's going to put him down. I'm there with you. I think Canelo is going to get a late round TKO, and he's going to drop him.
Yeah, I would say, let's call it 10th round. 10th round. He puts the pressure on. I think the fight could be relatively close in the 10th round. Like, it could even be tied at that point. Because I think Billy Joe Saunders is capable of really piling up the points. He really is. The only thing is, it's really hard to do what he has to do for 12 rounds, which is he can't run. Like, you run from Canelo, you're going to look bad, and he's going to hunt you. And then he's going to sense that you're running, and then he's just going to punish you more, and he's going to go for knockouts. So he's going to have to fight him in the middle of the ring, and that's why it's going to be so difficult for Billy Joe Saunders to win. But he can't take it deep into this fight. I'll call it a 10th round knockout by Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he tires him out, and by those late round fights, I think Canelo puts him down. I think this is something, especially since he doesn't like the guy, right? He's going to want to put him down, especially if he has that opportunity. He's going to take those shots, and he's going to be able to put him down. So let's get into some of the later fights. Before we get into that, Noel said, Alfredo, the thing is, Billy's never boxed anyone like Canelo, even if Canelo's opponents are higher than Billy opponents in boxing. That helps a lot. 100% agree. Billy record looks clean, but he hasn't fought the best of fighters. Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I really liked his fight against David Lemieux. Like, that was a really, really nice fight by Billy Joe Saunders. But other than that, Chris Eubank Jr., that's a nice win, but that was a split decision. But 30-0 is 30-0. That's something you can never take away from a fighter. A fighter who's undefeated is a different fighter than anybody else. Like, they're gonna feel undefeated, and they're gonna have a certain fearlessness because they've never tasted defeat before. So that's why it's such a big challenge for Canelo.
Yeah, because that guy has a little more confidence, right? When you've never been put down, you always have a little more confidence. And a lot of what's going on in the boxing ring is mental. It's mental warfare. It's making sure that you can land what you want to. And if you don't feel confident, you won't throw those weapons. You won't throw, what you want to or implement your game plan. So for him to come in undefeated, it's going to be a very strong mental thing, because now he has that confidence coming in behind him. So let's get into the rest of this card, because if I'm right, I could be wrong, but I think you reminded me about one of these guys. His name Keyshawn Davis. Is that the guy you were telling me about? One of the rising stars that's coming up?
No, Elwin Soto at flyweight. He's a guy that could be coming up and maybe a future opponent for Juan Estrada, or maybe even Chocolatito Gonzalez. So Elwin Soto, he's going to be, he's in what they call the co-main event. But this is essentially the entire card reads like Canelo Alvarez's stable. You know what I mean? So like Irving Macias Castillo is a nice prospect, so that's a guy that you want to watch. But yeah, Elwin Soto is the guy who I'm interested in watching. They're giving him Katsunari Takayama. He's a top 10 fighter, but if I'm right, I think Elwin Soto dusts him off like inside of 6 rounds.
And there's also a WBA Intercontinental Super Welterweight title against Kieran Conway taking on Solomon Sikosko. Any thoughts on that fight?
Not much. I don't have much thoughts on those, especially when it's a WBA Intercontinental, because that's a fight that they create a belt for so they can sanction it. So it's whenever they want to put a top guy against a guy who's outside of the top 10, they end up using one of the lower level belts to put it in. So that's just a showcase, really. Elwin Soto is where it's at, right under the main event of Canelo and Billy Joe.
Yeah, man, nice boxing card coming on. Is there any other boxing things coming up that you wanna speak about before we close things out?
Well, coming up, of course, May 22nd, Jose Ramirez versus Josh Taylor. That's going to be on ESPN Plus. That's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, because Ramirez is putting on both of his titles, and Taylor's having both of his titles up for grabs. So you're talking about 4 titles, 1 fight. Okay, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, Devin Haney takes on Jorge Linares. If for you boxing fans, 3 years ago, Jorge Linares was considered the best pound for pound fighter in the world. A couple of losses later, he's fighting Devin Haney and was essentially a loser leave town match, all right, at WBC lightweight. So the winner there gets to move on. And of course, June 5th, here in Miami, Teofimo Lopez will defend his title against George Kambosos Jr. You know, it's a showcase, but hey, we get Teofimo Lopez in our backyard.
Hey man, anytime you can watch Teofimo fight, that's something spectacular. Because
and of course, the day after that is Floyd Mayweather Logan Paul, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least because of what they have going on with that whole thing happening in Miami. Any thoughts on what happened in Miami?
I don't know. It was a clown show, but you know, I like I said on Twitter, the easiest way to get rid of these clown shows is to put on big fights. But you know, it was interesting. Canelo was asked about that by the Le Batard show, and he said, you know, that he'll one up Floyd Mayweather, and he said that he's willing to, if they're going to fight June 6th, he says that he'll fight both Logan Paul and Jake Paul in the same night, and then also fight Paul Rudd, because I guess Paul Rudd was there doing some promotion. So he said he'll fight 3 Pauls in one night. So it'll be interesting. Like, if we're going to have things like that, then maybe I could get excited about it. Like Floyd Mayweather, I think, did his promotion a disservice when he was asked, you know, would you fight both Pauls on the same night? And he said, of course I would. And I was thinking to myself, okay, that should have been the promotion from the beginning. You fight Logan and Jake in the same night, right?
Man, can you imagine if they did that? That would be, they would sell out so many, because you know he would do it. And he would knock him out in the first round early, right? Whoever he fights first, he would knock him out early. And then after that, he would probably just punish the second fighter, just hurt him, bro, until the referee or the corner has to stop the fight.
Yeah, I'm all for something like that. Like if they're gonna do it, if we're gonna have a clown show, let's have a clown show. You know what I mean?
I don't mind the clown shows. They bring publicity, and the more publicity, the better. I think as far as the fight game goes, the more names you can get, because Ben Askren was kind of a nobody, but now Ben Askren is somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's interesting to get into it. Noah Leon saying that's the difference between boxing and MMA is the strength of cards. That's true. MMA cards, especially the top tier ones, those pay-per-view cards are absolutely stacked. If you just look at, you know, the recent one we had, that whole card was just phenomenal. 3 title fights, each one of those title fights absolutely significant.
The thing is that MMA has Dana White. Boxing has about 100 Dana Whites. That's the problem.
Well, speaking about the other guy, right? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The promoter for Bellator. Bellator actually has a fight tonight, and Anthony Rumble Johnson is actually fighting. So that's going to be fun. He was supposed to take on Yoel Romero, but Romero did have to withdraw. He's facing Jose Augusto now, and the winner is going to fight Vadim Nemkov for the Bellator Light Heavyweight Championship next. It's a tournament style, right? Winner gets $1 million, but winner fights Vadim Nemkov for the Light Heavyweight title next. That's going to be a fun one. Main event is going to be Sergio Pettis, Anthony Pettis' little brother, against Juan Archuleta. That's for the flyweight title as well. And then tomorrow, we have Walkouts and Knockouts. It's going to be at 4 p.m. with me and Ariel. We're going to break down that UFC fight. The PFL fight is coming up as well. Leon said, yeah. Clarissa Sheilds is coming up to fight in PFL. What are your thoughts on Clarissa Sheilds making her crossover MMA debut?
Oh, I'm interested to see, you know, what she's learned. She's been training for a long time. You know, she's in the wrong division. I can tell you that right now. If she has any championship aspirations. But it's gonna be interesting. She's a trained fighter. Like not many are gonna be able to throw hands as well as she can. So she will have that in her back pocket. And there's been there's some precedent to this actually succeeding. Holly Holm became champion, and Holly Holm was a boxer. So you never know. You just know that it's not gonna happen against Amanda Nunes. That's all you really do know.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like, not yet for sure, because she's not there, but she's training with John Jones. And when you have an athlete that's at that level, maybe 2-3 years down the line, you can see that fight. Leon said she has more balls than any of the guys who don't make the walk to the cage. Absolutely right, man. I would love to see Clarissa Shields versus Logan Paul, because I think she would absolutely destroy him. It wouldn't even be close. But I think she's gonna have a good debut. I think PFL is doing a phenomenal job. They had Verdum fighting last night. They have Rory McDonald over there. They have Anthony Pettis over there. They have a lot of good fighters, and I love what they're doing with that ESPN Plus partnership. They're on ESPN2 as well. So let's get into it. Alex M says, "What's up, fight fan? What's going on, bro?" Make sure to check out the video. Earlier we talked about the Canelo fight a little bit more. Just talking about some extra accessory fights. Cap for life. Yo, speaking of knockout, Alf called it on Masvidal, Mexican Ginger in 5. You think that he can get it done? You think he can get it done in 5?
Nah, Billy Joe Saunders. I'll give Billy Joe Saunders just a little bit more credit than that. He'll go farther than 5.
Yeah, I think he would have to make a catastrophic mistake for that to be a 5th round knockout. We were both saying about 10th or 11th round when Billy Joe gets a little more tired. That's when he thinks that that potential for that Canelo knockout is there. Not a huge card tomorrow as far as UFC, but we are going to have a couple of UFC fights as well tomorrow. You have Donald Cowboy Cerrone. He's going to be fighting tomorrow. He's supposed to be fighting Diego Sanchez. That whole Josh Fabia thing happened, and that's probably one of the weirdest things that I've seen happen ever. And next weekend we have the first new lightweight champion that's going to be crowned when Tony New Bronx takes on Michael Chandler, and that's going to be absolutely fun for that. And then obviously probably the winner of McGregor versus Poirier is going to take on one of those guys. So lots of good MMA coming up, lots of good boxing coming up. Alf, any final thoughts to the people watching before you head out of here?
No final thoughts. It should be a lot of fun. There's some boxing that's slowly going to be making its way onto your TV. If you look at the schedule begins to heat up even next week. Like, I forgot, I didn't mention this one, but Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa is a hell of a fight. And that's also next week. That's part of the problem. They like to do a lot of cross promotions. ESPN likes to put up a lot of fights up against Showtime fights. So it's always PBC versus Top Rank constantly. So imagine if Bellator was on par with UFC and they decided to throw on a card every Saturday night that UFC had a big card. That's what boxing is being faced with right now.
The politics of boxing is just so hard. And that's the good thing about Bellator and PFL, all these things, right? Right now they have PFL on Thursday nights. You have Bellator on Friday nights. And you have UFC on Saturday nights. And it's absolutely perfect because you can watch all the MMA you want. Alex M said Josh will try to see UFC. I don't know what's up with that, man. Dude, Joshua Fabia, it's just... Did you see that video?
Which one?
The Fabia video when he went into the fighter meeting and he was scolding everybody, and Felder was like, "What are you talking about?" No,
I just
you got to check it out. Yeah, he goes in there with Diego Sanchez and he's basically scolding the MMA media, the announcers like John Anik, DC, Felder's in there, I believe, and they're just like, "What are you talking about?" But it's a funny video. He's trying to sue the UFC, saying all this stuff about Diego Sanchez. It's gonna be fun to see how it turns out. There was about to throw hands. I 100% agree with you, Alex Sam. But yeah, man, a lot of good fights coming up, a lot of good boxing coming up. We'll get you guys next week on Fight Week on 5. We'll cover your UFC 262, I think, is coming up. We also have like I said, walkouts and knockouts with me and Ariel tomorrow at 4 p.m. before the UFC. We'll give you our predictions, our betting picks for that fight. Thank you guys so much for checking out Fight Week on 5, brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network. My boy Alf Artiaga is here with us. I'm Jonathan, and I hope you guys have a great day and enjoy the fight.